All right, we're going to look at the application load balancer. It's a layer 7 load balancer, and we're going to set it up with an application, an API. So we will use a fictional bakery API server. That API server has 4 endpoints. The first one is US menu, which returns only a US menu for this bakery store. And the second one has the SA menu for the Saudi menu of the bakery store. And then we will have also a health endpoint and a fatal endpoint. So a health endpoint is basically used for checking the health of our web server, making sure that it's running and it's not crashing. So it will return 200 with some JSON payload. So you're going to look at the bakery API server here. This is the source code and it's written in Go. You can just run the binaries. So we have binaries for Linux, Windows, and Mac OS. We're going to use the binaries for Windows, and we're going to use these endpoints health, which will return 200 with some payload indicating the host that's coming from, and then SA menu, and then US menu, and then fatal. Fatal will crash and kill the server. This will be helpful to see if we are setting up things like auto scaling, for instance, or scale set in Azure. So let's take a look at the example, what we're going to do. So we're going to create, we're going to do this in Azure. So we're going to create an Azure VNet. This is called an AWS VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. We're going to name it Bakery VNet. And then we're going to create 4 subnets. So one subnet for our layer 7 load balancer, and then we're going to create a subnet for a group of backend servers, 3 subnets for 3 group of backend servers. So what's going to happen here is our load balancer is going to reside and live in a subnet inside the virtual private cloud or the virtual network in Azure. And then the clients will send requests through the public IP. So this layer 7 load balancer will have a public IP. So all clients or requests coming to this load balancer will go through the public IP. It should be attached to the load balancer. And then if the client requests any endpoint in our API, will go, the load balancer will redirect these into the bakery backend pool, which consists of a number of virtual machines. So this will reside in a subnet called backend subnet. And then if someone requests an endpoint for the US menu, the load balancer will route this into the subnet named US subnet, which has a backend pool called US menu backend pool that consists of a number of servers. And then if someone requests the Saudi menu, it will go to the servers that reside in this SA subnet that has an SA menu backend pool. Anything else will go to this, will default to this bakery backend pool. So now we do not need public IPs for this, because this is what is exposed to the public internet, the IP address that is attached to our layer 7 load balancer. However, since we need to install the web servers, we're going to assign public IPs for these for SSH only, right? There are ways to go around that and keep these instances on private IP. However, This will require some work on Bastion host and some other topics that we will not be the focus on this for this example. So let's see how we start. So to start, we're going to create the VNet with 4 subnets. So this is the virtual network with 4 subnets. So 1 for the load balancer, and then 3 for this group of backend pools. And then we create this layer 7 load balancer inside a subnet, and then we create 3 backend pools. So 1, 2, and then 3 for these backend pools. And then we're going to launch VMs in the remaining 3 subnets. So VM here, we're gonna do 1 just for testing, 1 VM here, and 1 VM instance here, and 1 VM instance here. So 3 in total. And then we're gonna add target VMs to the backend pools. We'll create a backend listener, configure the load balancer to use path-based routing rules. So things like US will go to the US menu backend pool, and things like SA that has SA in the URL will go to the SA menu backend pool. So let's see how this can be done in Azure. So to create the load balancer, it's in Azure, it's called Application Gateway. Go to the search, and then we search for Application Gateway. So I don't have anything here, so I'm going to create an Application Gateway. Click on Create. So select your subscription and resource group and give it a name. So I'm going to name it Bakery Application Gateway. Select the location, the region where you want to put it. I'm going to select East US. These are tiers that you can select to add additional services to your load balancer. Things like web application firewall. They have 2 versions, a recent one. So I'm just going to collect the standards. I'm not going to do a web application firewall here. So enable auto scaling, yes. I'm going to select the minimum instance count. 0 is fine for me. You can enable auto scaling later. So for now, I'm just gonna put the maximum 3, for instance, and then I will leave the minimum to 1, for instance. Availability zone, you can have it multiple zones. So I'm gonna select just one availability zone, 1A, 1AZ. Since this is just for testing, I'm not going to use HTTP2, so this is disabled. Now for creating a virtual network, I'm going to create a new virtual network. So I don't have any virtual network here. This is the VNet in AWS. In AWS, it's called virtual VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. So let's create a new. I'm gonna name it. So I'm gonna name it. Let's choose the same name here. So Bakery VNet. Now we need a number of subnets. So I'm gonna just leave the default side orientation that was giving to me for the address space, and then from that I will draw the number of subnets that I need. Since we need 4, so I'm gonna select 4 subnets. One is called the LV subnet, and then backend subnet, and US subnet, and SA subnet. So this is going to be the LB subnet, and then backend subnet, I'm gonna give it 10 0 0. Let's give it 10. This is 24 1 24. No, let's give it this one 1 0, since the side orientation 24. Yeah. So backend subnet is 10 0 1 0 24. So that will give me 256 addresses for servers. So I can put 256 of those. We're only going to do one. So that was the back end subnet. We're going to do the US subnet, and then 10 0 2 0 slash 24. SA subnet. I'm going to do 10 0 3 0 slash 24. Right, so now we have 4 subnets in total. We gave our virtual network a name, Bakery VNet, and we named our subnet so we can put the load balancer in here. The backend server is here, one of the backend servers, and then the servers dedicated for handling US menus will live here, and then the one that will handle the Saudi menu will go right here. So hit OK. So now it's asking me to, so it automatically selected the VNet that I created. However, it selected the wrong subnet, so I'm going to change this to the LB subnet because this is for the application gateway. So make sure you select the right subnet. Next, we're going to get front end, and this is where we assign the IP here to our load balancer. So let's go to the front, make sure it's public. You can make it private if this is an internal load balancer. So this is a public, not internal, so I'm gonna create a new IP. Alright, so Bakery Application Gateway public IP, and then select yes. Okay, so this is, we'll assign an IP version 4, public IP for me. Backend, now we need to add those backend pools. So how many do we have? 3. So one for the bakery backend pool for all the endpoints, and then one for the specific US menu. Any URL that has US will need a pool, and then similarly for the Saudi. So we're going to create 1, 2, 3 pools. So we're going to add a backend pool. So let's stick to the same names here. This is bakery backend pool. So bakery backend pool. We're not going to add instances and virtual machines to it, so we said add backend pool without targets. So we're not going to add targets, so no VMs in it, just the pool alone. Alright, so we'll say yes, and then we're going to do add. Right, create the remaining 2. So the one US menu backend pool. Similarly, no targets, and then SA menu backend pool, no targets, add. Alright, so we have 3 backend pools. We now need to configure it. So now, if we go back to our diagram, we have the public IP, we have the load balancer in a subnet. Obviously, we first created the VNet, so done with this part. We created this, so done with this part. Now we need to do this magic of path routing. All right, it's not magic, I mean just table of matching these URLs and then sending them to the appropriate pool. Right? So we need to do this part. So these are the front end. The front end is right here, the public IP. Routing rules is here, that's missing right here. And then the backend pools are already configured, but no target. So we have not created any VM yet. So let's create these routing rule. So I'm going to give it a name. This is for the rule. So bakery rule, and then this is basically for this one. All right. So so I'm going to give it a name. So let's give it a name, bakery rules, and then priority 1, and then listener, give it a listener name. So the listener, this is where we listen to the HTTP request on port 80. So I'm gonna say bakery listener, right? The front IP, select the same front IP that we have. We're going to listen on port 80. Additional setting, listener type is basic. We don't have multi-site, and I will leave the error page URL. All right. So I'm gonna click add. Sorry. So that was the listener. I need to add the backend targets. So for this listener, we need to add the default backend target. So for all the requests, I need to add the default pool, right? So we're gonna filter those two. Those will be filtered. Anything else will go to the default pool. The default pool is the bakery backend pool, right? So select target. So the backend target type is a backend pool. We're not doing redirection. So select here the bakery backend pool. That's the default. The backend target. So now for the target, we can create a new target. And then we can also create a new setting. All right. So selected this. Now we need to select the backend. So that was the backend target, bakery backend pool. We need to create a new settings. All right. So we're gonna have to create a new settings because we don't have settings yet. So click on add settings. Let's call it bakery backend setting. All right, and it's port 80. That's the port that we're going to listen on. We're not going to enable cookies because we don't have sessions to maintain sessions. This is useful when you're doing sessions and you want to keep directing the client to the same server that has the session tokens. Connection draining, this is for graceful shutdown. We're not going to, if we kill one of these VM, we're not gonna check if there are already requests are still being processed, not complete. We're just gonna kill it. All right, so we're not gonna enable this. Timeout, leave the default for 20. We're not going to override any backend path, and we do not have to change or override the incoming HTTP host. So I'm going to leave everything the same. So only give it a name. Protocol is HTTP and 80. Everything else is disabled. And click add. So now we have listeners and we have backend targets, the default target, Now we need to add the path-based rules. To add the path-based rules, we need to click on this, add multiple targets to create a path-based rule. So click on this link, and now we get the fun part. So we're going to say, hey, for every /US/**, send it to this backend pool, the US pool. So we're going to do /US/*, and then you have to give it a name. So US menu target, backend settings, select the same backend setting, and then the pool, you have to select the US menu backend pool, right? So one setting will go, it has multiple backend pool configurations, so select the US menu backend pool. So anything with US will go to this pool, and then click add. All right, we add one more. So here we do SA star, it's a backend pool, SA menu, what did we call it, that one, SA menu target, you can name it anything, and then we're going to select the target settings, bakery settings, and then select the pool, the SA menu backend pool, right? And then add, right? So we had two targets now. We can add the default if we want to, so we can do /*, and then default target. So anything else, I don't think we need to add it, and just cancel it. I don't think, if we need to, I will go and then add it later. So let me just discard change and go back to routing rules. So now we have two. So these are the path-based rules, right? So let me just click on add now. So click add. So now we have bakery rules. You can click on it. You can see the targets that we have two, right? So yeah, I would have to see, I guess, if the star will be required to add to the default bakery backend or not, right? So let's close this here, and now we're done with this configuration, right? So the configuration at the front end is done, our routing rules are done, backend pools is done. Only thing is missing right now is adding VM, and we have to place them inside these subnets and inside these bakery backend pools, right? So next, for tags is just for you to manage. So I'm gonna give it a name, and then I'm gonna say bakery application gateway, right? Load balancer LB. Review and create. So our load balancer is in the region East US. Just make sure that you know the region, so that way you can pick the instances in the same region. I'm going to create this application gateway. All right, so this will take some time. I'm not going to wait. I'm going to go to the home. I think this deployment will take some time, so we can go back to it later. For now, let's just go to home and then create 3 virtual machine. So 1, 2, 3 in each pool. So let's create a virtual machine. So create Azure virtual machine. I don't have nothing here. Select the subscription and group. Give it a name. So this is the first one. I'm gonna call it bakery backend VM1. Region is in East US, same as our load balancer. And then availability options the same. This is going to be an Ubuntu image. Size, pick the cheapest one. I'm going to use SSH public key. Username is Azure user. You can change this. And then we're going to allow SSH, right? So let's go to disks. We don't need anything with disks, so I'm going to use the default. Networking. It's very important to pause now and make sure that you select the subnet. Select first the VNet and then select the subnet, right? So this is going to be for this guy. So this guy lives in this VNet called bakery VNet and lives in the subnet called backend subnet, right? So it's chosen for me here. So this is the bakery VNet and this is the subnet that's selected, backend subnet, right? Public IP, yes, because we need to do SSH. Again, I said this is not needed because we can set up a bastion host and keep them private for security. But for now, let's just give it a public IP. We can go later, I believe, and deattach it. Right, so network interface security group, public inbound ports, SSH 22. We also need to enable port 80. However, since we're going to allow users and clients to access the load balancer, we do not need to open port 80 here, right? Because the clients will talk to the load balancer and load balancer will can fetch from these since they are in the same subnet, right? So we do not need to open it in the firewall. So this guy, the load balancer, can ask these machines on any port. Alright, so just select SSH 22. I want to delete the public IP. This is just annoying when you delete things, so just make sure that when I delete the VM, anything IP network interface card is also deleted. So don't check load balancing because we're setting up ourselves. So next, go to management. Nothing is needed from management, I guess. Let's go to monitoring. Disable this boot diagnostic. We're not running production, we're running just for testing. And then go to advanced. Nothing is here. And then let's tag it, right? So name, I'm gonna give it this is the Bakery Application Gateway Load Balancer project. Same tag so you can find them, and then review and create, right? So just make sure your region, your virtual private cloud or VNet here is correct and the subnet is correct. So this is the preview step before we create. So we will review it and then we will hit create. It's taking some time. Alright, so East US, and then we also see that the networking is in the bakery VNet and this correct subnet. Alright, so create and then download those private keys so we can SSH. And then I'm going to create 2 more subnets, right? So subnet for US menu and a subnet for the SA menu. So same step, I'm going to go back to the create virtual machine, create as a virtual machine, select the resource group, and then give it a name. So I'm going to create a bakery US backend VM1. Alright, we're going to US East, and then I'm going to get a public key pair, and no disks, and go to the networking, and then select the VNet selected. This is going to be in the US subnet. Again, this is something I selected here. It's the US backend, so I'm gonna put it in the US subnet. Network interface disable, public impound only SSH22. Delete those. So check this to delete the IP when the VM is deleted. Next management, next monitoring, disable this diagnosis boots, and next, and then target name, and then I'm going to give it the same name, and then review and create. Okay, make sure it's East US, review everything, East US, and then the networking, VNet and US subnet. So that's correct. Create, and then download your key pair, and then go to the create the third virtual machine. So I'm not going to wait for this. I'm going to click on virtual machines, and then home virtual machines, click on plus, create the third one. Resource group, select the same resource group. This time it's the SA backend VM1, US East, and then same settings. You can download a new key pair. Disks the default. Here select the VNet, and the subnet for this one is the SA subnet, and then delete the public IP when we delete the VM, and then next go to management, and then monitoring, disable the boot diagnosis, advanced tags, target with a name, and select the same name, review and create. Again, review the region and the VNet and the subnet. So make sure you review those. So let's see, the East US is correct, and then networking is a subnet inside the bakery VNet, right? So create this guy. So now we have created 3 virtual machines. We have not added them to the backend pool yet, right? So we're going to add them to the backend pool. So just download this third private key. Before I add them, let me just go ahead and run the web server. All right, I think it's a good idea to go and download, go to the bakery API server on GitLab, and then download the web server on these 3 instances, right? So how do we do this? To do this is you go to virtual machines. Right now I have 2, so I'm going to start with a bakery backend VM, copy the public IP, and then open a new tab, and then type shell.azure.com. You can do it in your terminal. So let's do this really quick. So I'm asking here to select the subscription and create storage in it. This will take some time. So now I'm on the shell, so I'm going to upload my keys. I don't have keys here. So if I do ls, this is really slow. So if I do upload, I'm gonna upload all the keys. So one by one, for the second, and then upload the third. All right. So now if I do ls, so I need to change the mode for those. So do change mode and just pump the phone a bit. So I'm gonna do. So you can see that they all end with .pem. So I'm gonna change mode 400 to star.pem. Right. So now we're done. Now if I refresh our VM, hope the third one is up and running. Yes. So we're gonna start with the bakery and then the Saudi and then the US menu instances. So let's start with this one. So SSH minus I, and it's bakery backend Azure user at a public IP. Yes. All right. So we need to run this binary. So you can just go ahead and download this binary, or you can clone the project. So to clone the project, click on the clone and then copy the URL with the HTTPS. All right. I don't copy the one with SSH. I just copy the one with HTTPS. So copy URL. Git is already installed on Ubuntu, so I'm gonna do git clone and then paste the URL. Alright, so this will download the project. So now I'm going to run the binary. So if I do ls, I'm going to give it yeah, I think let's just run it with sudo. I think it should be able to. So sudo and then web server bin and then web server Linux. Just hit tab. So this should run the web server. So let's see. And now it's running and listening in port 80. So since I need to exit this virtual machine, this shell, but I want the server to still running, I need to send this to the background. To do this, I am going to hit Control Z. Again, you have to hit Control Z on the keyboard. So Control Z, now the process has stopped, so it's not running. So I need to run it on, bring it back to the background, right? So I do BG, and now it's running, right? In the background. So stopped, and then with Control Z, and then I type the command BG to send it back to the background. So to test the server, I'm gonna do curl HTTP. I'm on localhost, and then I don't need to specify the port because this is port 80. So I'm gonna do health, right? And the API is running. So it retained the name of the host, bakery backend VM1. Status is healthy. All right. So I'm going to exit from this. So I'm going to type exit, and then I need to go to the next VM. So the next VM is going to be the SA. So select the key, hit tab, and grab the public IP. So the SA is, this is the public IP. Yes. And now I'm on the VM. So I'm going to run not sudo, I mean just git clone, and then copy the HTTPS to the project. Alright, copy the URL to the repo. And then run with sudo. So sudo web server, and then bin, and then server Linux, and then Control Z, stop it, and then BG to send it back to the background. Alright, call HTTP localhost. You don't need to specify 80 if you want. This is how you do it. And then health, and it's running. So exit this instance. Do the third. Copy the public IP of the third, the US. Use the up arrow to get specify the key, your private key, and then the public IP of the instance, the US instance, and then hit yes. And then similarly git clone, copy the HTTPS URL, and then run it. So wait for it to download. Sudo web server bin Linux 1.2, Control Z, and then BG, enter. Curl HTTP localhost health, and it's running. So exit. So our 3 VMs now are running. So we need to add them to the pool. Alright. So we need to go and add them to the, assign them to the backend pool, and then tell the load balancer the name of the health endpoint, which is root health. So let's go to our load balancers, the application gateway. Click on it, Bakery Application Gateway. Alright. You can click on backend pools. You can see we have a bakery backend pool with 0 targets. They're all with 0 targets. So now we can click on each backend pool and add targets. So this is the backend pool. We can select the target type, virtual machine, and select the virtual machine. So this is going to be for the bakery backend pool, which is this guy here. We're going to add the default one, right? So let's do bakery backend pool with the ID, and then save. Right? Similarly, make sure that we're not adding backend without targets this time. So virtual machine for the US, and select the US VM. So bakery US bakery, this is the VM ID, and then save. Add the Saudi, so select virtual machine, and then add the SA. Save. Right? So getting these notifications that it's still being assigned. Next, so since we added them to the pool now, if I go back to my diagram, this is completely done, right? except that we need now to configure the load balancer to say, hey, the health check is root health, because this is our API, and we need to tell it this is the API endpoint for health check, right? Just making sure that this is added, so 0 target, session 0, okay, 111 target, good. So now we need to go and scroll down. If we click on backend health, it should be unhealthy. Still loading. They should show up as unhealthy. I'm not sure if it will look at root health. Let's see. Oh yeah, still unhealthy, right? So we need to tell it and configure this. So let me just see which option. Backend pool, health probes. Yeah, this is the option, health probes. We need to add a new health probes. So click on add health probe. The host is so this is the host that we're going to use. Since the application gateway is configured on a single site, we're not using a multi-host, we need to select 127.0.0.1, right? So 127 localhost 0.0.1. Pick host name from backend setting. No, pick from backend settings, yes. Now the path that we need to send the health, so the path is root health, and then 30 for the intervals, and then 30 for the timeout, and then the unhealthy threshold is 3, so you're gonna send 3 times, and then we wait 30 seconds. So send 1 to health. If it doesn't return 200, we'll wait 30 seconds, then send another one, right? So depending on what application you're building, you might need to adjust this one to shorter time. So it says here, use probe matching condition. No. I think this should do it. You want to test the backend health before adding the health probe to check this. This will be helpful. And then click on test. Right? Oh, so nothing to test. No HTTP settings selected. So let me see. Oh yeah, the backend setting. You have to select your setting, bakery backend setting. This was going down, I didn't see it. So now we selected our backend settings, and we selected root health. This is for our API. So if you have a different API, you put another endpoint, and then I specified the host as 127.0.0.1, give it a name, select HTTP, and the rest were the default settings. All right, just make sure you select the backend settings at the end. So now if you click test, it should work. Let's give it a time. So it's correct. So we add them. Right. So this is our health probe. Now our backend health should return to healthy, right? Let's give it a time. I think we need to refresh a number of times until it becomes healthy. So now it's unhealthy. This will take some time, so I'm just gonna pause now and then come back when it's green. So let's just pause and then come back when it's green. All right, so now it's healthy. So now our load balancer is able to send heartbeats to these instances inside each backend pool. So the backend pools, servers inside the backend pools are returning 200s to the ALB, and the load balancer now is able to determine that if this is healthy, we're gonna send them traffic, route traffic to them. If not, we're not going to. You're gonna get something, an error like 502 or something, right? So let's play with the API. So let's go to the overview of our load balancer and grab that front end public IP. So this is the public IP. Copy the public IP. And now we can open any tool that you can send HTTP. So I'm on Mac. I'm gonna open my terminal. But you can open or use any tool to send HTTP requests, right? So I'm gonna start here and send an HTTP request. So curl -i to include the header response. When the server is responding, I want to see also the header. And then I'm gonna put the public IP, right? Paste. There's a new enter here. So I guess when I copied this, let me just copy it here. So clear my screen, curl -i, and then put the URL. So HTTP front of the public IP. So typically you want to point a domain, not a public IP of your load balancer, right? So let's check the health. Make sure it's healthy. All right, awesome. So we got healthy, and it's coming from, if you see X, this is a custom header. It says X coming from host, bakery backend VM1, right? So no matter how many times you run this, it will return from the bakery VM1, right? Because that's the default one right here, right? So health is not specified, not US, not SA, so it will go straight to here. So let's send US menu, right? So same curl command -i, and then the HTTP, the public IP, and then we're gonna do US menu, right? So let's run it. And it's coming from the bakery US backend VM1, right? And we get the US menu. So that means our load balancer routed or redirected the request to the target backend pool. All right, so let's do the Saudi last one. SA menu. Awesome, and it's coming. So it's coming from host bakery SA backend VM1, right? So you can play with this. You can. I think believe you can. It should work on your browser if you put it in your browser. Yeah. So you can see the request, and if you open the developer tool, you will be able to see it in the network, right? So if I refresh, send the request again to the SA menu. So we see here, not the menu, sorry. So this is the response to 100, and I'm trying to see the response. So this is the name, so this is the body of the response, headers. I only see the request, yeah, response header, it should be here. Yes, so it says X coming from host bakery SA backend VM1, right? So I did this in Safari. You can do it in any browser to send the request. Now I want to kill the server, right? That's a very strong word. So let's say if we cause it to crash. So I'm gonna click on the health, backend health, and it's taking some time to load. So while it's loading, I'm gonna send fatal. All right, remember the API, the fatal endpoint. So fatal, and see what happens, right? So now we have 3 instances, 3 virtual machines running just fine. So 1, 2, 3. If we send fatal, it will kill the instance. Which one? It's going to kill one here from the US or the USA. No, it will kill one from the bakery backend pool, right? The only one here. Why? Because /fatal, if you look at the API here, /fatal doesn't have US or SA in the address. So there is no US, there is no SA, it will go to this backend pool, right? So this guy should die. If I call health, I shouldn't get anything, right? So let me just check. So using the public IP of the load balancer, I'm gonna send fatal. All right, and now let's go to this in the portal. Still shows healthy. This is the bakery backend. This is the US menu, SA menu, bakery. This one should die, right? The third one. So let's see. The SA should be running, US should be running. So let's refresh. This will take some time. I think it's not in sync with the backend. So just keep refreshing until you see the result. So the API returned if I call health. So getting bad gateway, that means it crashed. So let's see, if we refresh now, it should show unhealthy. Okay, it's taking some time. Wait, I wonder if it's the auto scaling created a new instance for us once this crashes. We should have seen this. There will be some latency when we hit the when a new instance is launched. So yes, finally it's unhealthy. I guess this portal thing is not in sync with the instance. So now we crashed this server. If auto scaling is enabled, it will realize that this server is no longer returning 200, so no heartbeats, and it will create a new instance for us, right? So that's how you set an application load balancer. This is really useful in situations where you send images, videos, or direct things to bigger instances. So you can make a subnet for larger instances, class of instances, and we send specific requests for those powerful instances. All right. So that's how you set up an application level load balancer and redirect the URL, set up some redirection for path-based routing rules to your instance. So this guy is still unhealthy. See. Yeah. So to bring it up, we have to go to the instance, log into the instance, and then run the process again. So this is again how you set up these steps, how to configure and set up an application level load balancer, right? Thank you.